Hey, what's up? Um, Starting, I would say tomorrow, I'm going to try to start uploading videos while I talk to these points. I might do some gaming while I talk to these points. I have to my previous video, but I just didn't cam up. But now that the computer is at my disposal, I think I can start, gaming while giving commentary. You know something? One thing that I began to realize when it comes to these times, I began to realize the self hatred that black people would display. Black people and those who don't consider themselves black, but rather refer to themselves by their ethnicity, you know? Rather than say, hey, they're black, they might say they're Nigerian, Somalian, Ghanaian. It's that kind of stuff. They don't really go under the title black. That's something this side of town. You say, hey, you're black. They'll be like, nah, black is a color. It's that kind of stuff. So people understand, that side of how things are done when it comes to the African diaspora. But one thing I came across that, never really stuck with me because growing up, my parents never instilled any kind of self hatred to where, I saw my complexion as a problem. I've never, picked that up from my family. Now, walking out to the world, you will come across that kind of stuff. People, when I was younger, would make comments about my complexion. Um, but I've come to realize when there's a racial caste system, and that's exactly, what's the case. This kind of stuff is global, you know, and it's extreme depending on where you go. Now, here's the thing. It's never something that stuck with me. I grew up to a mixed community. I've seen everybody. When you deal with everybody, you have a bigger scope of, how people act. You're just not brought up around people who look like you, but people who are from other demographics. And one thing I've noticed when it comes to self hate, when it comes to black people, is that those who deal with that kind of stuff, it is very cancerous. I mean, my one friend, he deals with a lot of self hate. I feel firmly that he deals with so much self hate to where I'm gonna be honest, I can't listen to that stuff around the clock. It's like being around an incel circle. It's just perpetual chronic negativity when it comes to yourself as it pertains to your community, and you're just so quick to highlight the negatives. And look, I can understand when it comes to certain aspects. They live around a violent area, and I'm sure that if I lived around those conditions, I would feel the same way as him, but I don't. So my mindset is different. And I don't think even if I lived around that, I would have a hatred for, you know, black people. Because, crime is it's very closely related to poverty. When you're around a place where there's access to abundance, criminality goes down because you don't want to risk losing your freedom. You're actually living life. But when there's scarcity, criminality becomes commonplace. You know? That's where you'll find the most crime to certain areas. And usually economic depravity is not far behind. I like to put things in perspective so that, things can be understood and cured. My friend, he doesn't go that far. For him, he thinks it's more of a cultural thing. It's something that we just do. We do it more than anybody else. He's been completely indoctrinated, you know? And I don't, all this, you know, joke stuff when it comes to people, like the whole Uncle Ruckus thing, People might laugh about that kind of stuff, but that mindset is very real. You know, it's very abnormal. It's very cancerous, but it's actually a thing. That Uncle Ruckus mindset, to where they just internalize self hatred, to where that just becomes a part of their life. That is no way to live. I can't. That doesn't stick to me. You know, because I realize there's a bigger game at play. I realized there's a bigger game at play. When I began to realize that, hey, man, you know something? You live to a racial caste system. You know, your success, it actually is determined by, uh, what you were born as. It can be regulated based off that. Now, can you move beyond that? You can move beyond that, but it is an ever-present thing. You know, it will always be brought up as something that, well, when it comes to racism, you must confront. And that's the thing. Racism is something you must confront. You can't even turn your back to it or act like you didn't hear it or see it. That it's not something to where you can ignore. You know, because it's been so normalized. It's been normalized. And people who don't walk that kind of road don't understand it. You know, when something doesn't happen to you, it feels less real. Like it almost needs to be explained, shown, and even then there's like room for doubt, because then there's like, well, what were they really thinking? Like it becomes that kind of stuff to where people just, if they can't see themselves in your shoes, it's like a disconnect. I don't have that. The only thing I have to do is see something for me to begin to process it. Or, even if it's hard for me to understand something, I'm still open-minded to the idea that something can be an issue, even if it doesn't happen to me. Now, growing up, like I said, I grew up to a mixed community. And I was never really a social kind of character. I was isolated, so I was never a street kind of guy. Now, people like that did walk around me, but me growing up in the church, I would always walk the other direction. That's the thing. Growing up to the church, it was like a thing that kept me it kept me from getting a record, I'll say. Because I was always nervous of getting in trouble. It was that kind of thing. Raise up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart. It will become like a life thing, a life lesson thing. And that's stuck with me, to where if I saw them getting into some kind of whatever, I would just walk the other direction. Or my mom didn't want me to engage in certain things, to where I would just even be nervous to be around certain activity. So, I never gravitated towards that crowd. And when it comes to, other black people, and as strange as this sounds, when it comes to other black people who would bring up systematic racism as a problem, I would think to a certain degree, like, is it really that heavy? Because I've never experienced that, but then again, I grew up to a mixed community and I was reclusive, so there was never really a high interaction with me and people who go into the avenue of law enforcement. That was never a thing, or it was never a thing to where I had to, be confronted with this kind of stuff from day to day and be glass ceilinged off from, opportunities, simply because people to the opposite end of the spectrum would see me as competition, and they would elevate themselves more than, me, based off, the whole racial caste system, racial nepotism. People engage in that kind of stuff. We have to be honest about why society looks the way that it does. Like, it never really sat well with me, even from a young age, when I would see the quote unquote hood. You see these dilapidated houses, but then you go to another part of the city and, it's normal. or you know what I'm saying, supposedly like it's what every neighborhood should look like. That never sat well with me from a young age. I never understood that. But as I got older and as I began to open my eyes and realize what was around me, I began to understand why, the city is broken up like that. And, I remember watching Bill Maher, and he was talking to, um, there was this one guy, dang, what's this guy's name? Um, Shoot, I wish I could remember this guy's name. I mean, I see his face in my mind, but I'm trying to remember his name. But he said he's a black man in America. He lives under constant pressure. Even when I heard that, I didn't understand that. And Bill Maher was trying to give he was trying to give an example, or say, hey man, you don't want to be killed by a Muslim extremist. You don't want to be blown up by a bomb, do you? And this was around the whole 9/11 stuff. And he said, man, I'm a black man in America. I live under constant pressure. It was Mos Def. Mos Def was the guy. Mos Def on the Bill Maher show. And he was saying, hey, man, we live under pressure constantly. And I didn't understand that. Because like I said, even though I'm black, even though, this is my community, I've never really walked that kind of road. But during, the whole Trump years, the Obama years and the Trump years, that was eye-opening for me. Even though I didn't walk that road, being out and experiencing that kind of stuff firsthand, everybody could still see it perpetually on TV and social media, And, I began to feel that. When it's something when you check social media and you see yourself constantly brought up as a hashtag, people who look like you being killed. You feel that walking through that kind of nightmarish existence. That's not something that's funny. And I never understood during such a time how people could say, hey, you know something? That's bad what happened to this guy. But what about black on black crime? It is such a fake sort of argument to where it became tiring. But when you hear black people talking about that kind of stuff, even in the face of being targeted, it's like, what the hell? Like what's going through your mind to where rather than fix what's in front of you, you deflect off to, well, we're our own worst enemy. That's a sickness, It really is. And my friend, he has that level of self-hatred to where if you were to bring up these other issues, he'll go back to that. And maybe because, he lives to a violent area, maybe for him, he feels a level of resentment to where nothing else seems relevant until, what's immediate and this in front of, what this outside his door is addressed first. But how do you fix something, when, there's no, you don't have any solution, you try to tag this stuff as internal and it's like, man, it's not something that's internal. This isn't who we are as a group. Everything that we display is a result of trauma. You're dealing with hurt people, dealing with PTSD. That's why you see what you see. All our economic endeavors have been sabotaged. And this is the level of clarity that I have when it comes to this kind of stuff that doesn't allow me to internalize self-hatred when I'm looking at the stuff that I see. And, I don't go along with that kind of stuff. I just don't. But I do see what he's talking about when it comes to, black people attacking other black people. It's not racially motivated. That is truly about proximity. It really is. But that doesn't make it less of a problem. And I'm like, look, man, My mindset is the same as yours when it comes to fixing that kind of stuff. But I firmly believe that I firmly believe that law enforcement, when it comes to a neighborhood, needs to remain local, and like it needs to be brought up to a federal scope. I'm gonna tell you what I mean by that. There needs to be a federal backing to a neighborhood, you know, a cleanup, and a neighborhood self-governing when it comes to black people. I feel like it needs to be at that level. You know, that's how you clean up these places. But talking about how you're just a violent people, and you'll never stuff will never get better unless we all get on this one page. That kind of stuff. It's like self-defeating. I mean, change begins with you. And if all you can do is talk about how messed up you are and it's a cultural thing, and you have the genetics to be violent. I mean, my friend be saying some far out stuff, man. Like he thinks along the lines of, like he almost wants to look at this stuff under a microscope, to where he wants to narrow it down where your genetics, he's even though he's a black guy, and I'm trying to be vague, but people will know who I'm talking about. He deals with so much self-hate, you know. And like I said, I understand to a certain degree. We're on the same page, but how we reach the goal of peace, it's not going to be, we just have a different blueprint of how we get there. Because I don't think that anything he's saying is going to work. It's not going to work. It can't work simply because if you're going to just sulk with other people and fat entertainment with talking about how off black people are, then basically you're just chasing your tail at that point. Like it's something that's just perpetual. And it's not something that you should really, entertain. It's not self-debasing, avenues is not something you want to entertain at all. You have to be the change that you want, not to sound like a life coach, but that's what you have to do. And if you can't do that, then you need to get the hell out of Dodge. I mean, you need to find a way to get up out of an avenue to where you feel like you just can't exist. That needs to be a thing. I mean, it's hard for me to come up with a blueprint, but like I said, man, it's like all of this stuff was done by design. It was done by design. I'm gonna talk more about this stuff, but one thing I do not do is embrace self-hatred, because that's like embracing a ball and chain. Like you're literally just like it doesn't make sense if you're trying to, fix anything. But I'll talk some more about this later.